Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. Well, we've covered stories of Amritdhari Sikhs having their Kirpans forcibly removed across North America and indeed in India. Well, now it's the UK's turn as a Sikh influencer finds herself in the same position in a British airport. More on that in a moment. Donald Trump's rhetoric and his ego is well known, but is it jeopardising US jobs? A historic university city in the UK finds itself the subject of fascinating tours for tourists that highlight local heroic Sikhs from the past. And what will Khalistan look like according to the latest AI vision? All this and more on today's show. But joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, all the way over on the other side of the pond, and welcome to our viewers all over the world. Don't forget that we love to know where you're watching from, and that also helps us to shape our stories, such as tomorrow I'll cover a story of the history of Sikhs in Australia. So make sure that you put down in the comment section where you're watching us from, so we can make sure that we include your part of the world in our stories as we bring them to you. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed, absolutely. Very helpful to let us know that. But on today's show, James and I will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community, indeed, right across the world. And of course, we will, as usual, be taking a look at loads of your great comments at the end of the show, so do stay tuned for that. Right, James, let's get the show underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
We talk a lot about AI and how it's transforming the future, Angus, but one part that we haven't discussed is what AI projects for Khalistan. Now, I did this comparison between Grok 3, which is Elon Musk and X's version of the ChatGPT or AI. And then I also ran the same algorithm or the same statement through the Gemini system, which is from Google, of course. And they brought up very similar tellings about Khalistan, about the movement, and about India. So I thought that we would take a look at that and then also take a look afterwards at what we can learn from that and what actually it helped or what ways that it helps to guide the Khalistan movement forward. Because I think that there are some actual interesting points to take away from it. So let's take a look first at the actual way in which they interpret the information and share it, and then what they say, and of course what we can take from that. And so again, this is about the future of Khalistan, and I typed into each one, what is the future of Khalistan? A very simple term, and decided to put it through both algorithms, and this is what we came up with, Angus. Now, first of all, they both brought up about what Khalistan is, and we all know that already, about creating a separatist or a separate, unique, sovereign, and independent nation for Khalistan and the Sikh people, where Punjab is, and looking at the history of how the Sikh Empire was never reformed after the British left and did partition of 1947. Now, it also brings up how the Operation Blue Star and the Sikh genocide, although they both called them riots, there is more in the AI that's starting to recognize it as a genocide as opposed to riots. But in this case, it came up as riots. Now, this, of course, they look at how this has stern implications in terms of pushing the Khalistan movement forward and really actually feeding into the need for an independent state, and how India has continued to oppress and to hold down minorities, not just the Sikh community, but also the Muslims, the Dalits, the Christians, as we've talked about so many times before. And essentially what they have both also looked at is how the transnational repression and the death of Hardeep Singh Nijjar has helped to actually fuel the fire of the urgency to bring Khalistan to fruition. So again, they both are recognizing that there is a major problem with transnational repression and foreign interference when it comes to the India government and Prime Minister Narendra Modi's politics. Now, it also went on to bring out about the significant Sikh diasporas that are influencing the movement from countries including the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and others, and really trying to push that end of it. But they both also bring up the lack of support for the Khalistan movement within Punjab. Now, the way that the AI systems work is that they take a whole pool of information and they scrub the internet and basically go by consensus of information, as well as what the AI systems have been inputted in terms of data in the learning process. So at this point, of course, we know that the politics and the laws of India prevent a lot of people from speaking out in support of Khalistan out of fear of being imprisoned, or other laws that have been brought in by Modi and the BJP government to really quiet any dissent, quiet any opposition. And that's not only in the public, but also when it comes to politics. And of course, again, just really, really oppressing the minorities. So there is that real and legitimate fear for people to not speak out in support of Khalistan within the Punjab region or India as a whole. And this, the AI systems do understand that, but they don't point it out really directly. But they also say that things that could influence this shift and events are the resurgence of the movement, are things such as the way the government is handling Sikh minority issues, by the way that they are dealing with foreign interference and or at the helm of foreign interference and transnational repression, that it is not only gaining support for the Khalistan movement and separatism, but also increasing the pressure from international human rights organizations and the United Nations to basically deal with their human rights issues that are happening in India. But again, that is feeding into international support for Khalistan. So it's doing exactly the opposite of what Narendra Modi wanted and what his goal in terms of quieting that movement. And instead, it is actually giving it more of a voice. And I think that another point that they look at is they really don't bring up a lot of violence or accusations of violence by the activists. Instead, they bring up the points that the government of India has brought in these laws that actually suppress the right to freedom of speech and gatherings and so forth. And again, they point out that that could actually be harming Modi's position, that it is breaking up the country. Instead, they're saying that Modi himself is doing that, and that it's actually, again, supporting the need for more independence within the regions of India, not just in the Punjab. So again, it is a really interesting look at how AI is predicting that. And it also gives off the ideas that, of course, the Khalistan movement, through their democratic and peaceful process, have actually been very, very successful. And by continuing that process, while India, it plays their games and is involved in the transnational repression and the suppression of rights, is actually going to bring Khalistan closer to realization than ever. And that is very interesting as well. The fact that the Khalistan movement has been peaceful, that it is democratic, that people go out and have their voices heard, has really been a cornerstone of this whole movement, in that the world, if Khalistan, or I should say when Khalistan is formed, the international recognition by world leaders, by international organizations such as the United Nations or NATO or anybody else, to recognize them as a sovereign and independent nation is essential. So therefore, with the peaceful movement that the Khalistan referendum and Sikhs for Justice and other organizations are taking, it actually benefits them, because they are now gaining that support from world leaders as well. When the time comes, they will be recognized a lot quicker by the international body than they would if there was violence involved. When there has historically been violence in any type of separatist or independence movement, it has pulled back the support in terms of international politicians and international organizations because of the violence involved. They don't want to be seen as rewarding that. So I think that that is where the Khalistan referendum movement has really benefited by the way they've handled everything from the referendum vote itself, but also the Andutva infiltration, trying to create chaos at these locations or at the gurdwaras and within communities to separate and divide. So again, it really shows that there is a potential there, and even AI is saying that it's not out of the question, that it is a real possibility, Angus, that this could be a big step forward for the independence of Khalistan.
Indeed, I think this is an interesting exercise because it really it shows up in a simple summary how the propaganda war is going, and there's a few interesting elements that came out here. And of course, we must remember that AI, as amazing and as wonderful as it all sounds, ultimately it doesn't actually create or generate anything new. It doesn't create things out of nowhere and come up with these amazing ideas or amazing knowledge. All it does is it is trawling the existing knowledge on the internet, effectively, and it is collating that information that it finds on the internet that is in the public domain, and then it generates from that its own version of it. So it regurgitates the information that is already out there. So this is not new, but what it does, and this is what's important, it does actually then give a reflection of what is the general internet saying, and that's the key here. There's a few interesting things I picked out there. Firstly, it does regularly, or both versions did refer to Operation Blue Star. So great, the fact that Blue Star is out there on the internet and becoming widely known enough for AI to pick up. It did, as you say, pick up the Sikh riots. Now that's a concern, but it is increasingly moving towards the word genocide. Has been, obviously, as we know, has been recognised even within India itself. But that wasn't specifically picked out as a word, the Sikh genocide. That's disappointing, and I'll come on to this element in a moment. It did actually recognise that there is external support for the Khalistan movement. That again is significant and interesting. It doesn't actually specify who from, but it does mean that the Khalistan movement isn't just a small fringe element. It is actually getting external support from other nations or other administrations. That's important. That's right. Interestingly, it does, and I would say they are some of the victories for the propaganda war on the Khalistan side. One of the losses this is interesting. It says it lacks widespread support in the Punjab. Now, this of course doesn't surprise us because, of course, one of the main narratives coming out of India is it's a fringe movement. It does not have support within Punjab. We talk about this regularly, and clearly AI is again sucking up that information from the mainstream narrative of India, primarily saying it does not have mainstream support. So again, that does reflect how the Gaudiya media is really drowning the internet with this fake narrative that it doesn't have widespread support, whereas in fact it does have widespread support, as has been pointed out. It also referred to, I think the Grok referred to Amritpal Singh and his movement lacked popularity, failed to ignite support after he was arrested, etc. And again, that reflects the Gaudiya media version, because in fact the truth is perfectly evident there. The truth, there's no conspiracy theory here. Amritpal Singh was elected with a massive majority of 200,000 in his constituency, and he stood on a pro-Khalistan ticket, and he did ignite this movement. He's actually launched a new political party. So it's very clear that AI is basically wrong on that, as it has been on several of these issues. So again, it's not a criticism of AI, it's just a weakness of what it is. But as long as you can interpret AI for what it is, and that is what we're doing here, is that it is reflecting what the mainstream narrative is. And that mainstream narrative, as is often the case, is actually wrong, as we can prove otherwise. So that's how we must view this. But it does make interesting viewing. And I think the big question really is, does it matter? Does it matter what AI says about Khalistan? Now, yes and no, but yes, it does, because firstly, it actually gives us that real-time snapshot score, let's call it, in the propaganda war. How is the Khalistan movement doing in the propaganda war? Some wins, some losses. It's a sort of a bit of mid-table sort of standing at the moment. But the point is, it is in that Premier League. It is in that top table, although it's midway in this propaganda battle. It's winning some, but it's losing some. But the fact is, it is going up the table. The point is, if AI was saying Khalistan's definitely happening and great, but it's unlikely to get there immediately because we're up against the Godi media, which is massive, which is, as we know, the Hindutva online army are swamping the internet with this fake narrative, this anti-Khalistan narrative. So of course AI is going to pick this up. But what this message sends to the community at large is get the message out, get online, talk about Khalistan, talk about it positively, talk about how it is gaining momentum, talk about how it is going to happen, talk about the massive support which it genuinely has, talk about the referendum and how the referendum is clearly leaning towards Khalistan, etc., etc. So it's really important. Now, why is that important that AI says that Khalistan's going to happen? Because quite often administrations, believe it or not, I have no doubt, will be forming policy based on what AI is now telling it. AI is entering industry, it's entering government, it's entering the civil service. They are starting to get their opinions. They're lazy, a lot of these people. They just want quick research. They need quick research, so they just go onto AI and say, okay, what's this about Khalistan? So they'll read about Khalistan. Okay, right, now we need to form committees. We need to discuss and form policies based on what AI is telling us. So that's why it's important. We need to change the narrative away from the Godi narrative to the true narrative that Khalistan is a genuine movement. It has widespread support, not just in the diaspora, but also in the Punjab. It is being oppressed, but it is inevitable. And that's the message we need to get out, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And it really shows, though, that the world of AI is growing at such a rapid pace that if you do other searches, it's actually recognizing in some searches that it was a genocide, which I think is just a huge, huge leap forward in terms of the reality and the truth of what happened. And to start abandoning the term riots, I think, is a huge win. But it also is a lot more genuine and truthful about the facts of what happened back then, Angus. It is, an ever-changing industry, but very, very rapidly, unlike any technology that we've seen in the past. Now, when we take a look at the AI systems, it is, again, generating information based on data inputs, which include everything from your credit card spending to your bank spending to your Google searches, you name it. And if you look up tourism, it can be an amazing place because the systems will start to learn what your interests are and what you want to do, what you like, and gives you suggestions. But with that said, of course, that may be very important for a lot of Canadians now, because with the ongoing threats of tariffs, Canadians are a bit less, or a bit more inclined to shop for Canadian products. There has been a major shift in marketing Canadian-made and Canadian homegrown produce, or vegetables, different foods, car parts, whatever people can get that's made in Canada, they are watching for. And if they cannot get made in Canada, they instead are looking to make sure it's not made in the USA, which is going to have a huge financial impact on the US. But what is even worse than the threat of tariffs, and something that's probably going to have an even bigger long-term effect, is the fact that Trump and his administration keep referring to Canada as the 51st state and our Prime Minister as the Governor of Canada. At first at Mar-a-Lago, before he was inaugurated, it was seen as kind of a running joke in Canada. We just kind of laughed it off. But as it continued, it really started to wear the nerves of Canadians, in the fact that he is not showing our nation respect. He is not respecting that we are an ally and that we are another sovereign nation once again. Canadians are really upset about it now because it has dragged on. It's going through the media room and the media press briefings. They are officially referring to Canada as the 51st state, as the governor. And again, just today, Trump went online talking about, again, the 51st state and the governor. And that has got a lot of Canadians starting to say no. With that lack of respect, we're going to take our tourism dollars and and spend them at home. We are going to vacation within Canada, or we're going to go to other places. What we refer to traditionally as snowbirds are Canadians who are retired or semi-retired, who live part of the year down in areas such as Arizona to get away from the winter ugliness of Canadian weather. And now what we're seeing is that a trend of Canadians in Florida, in Arizona, and other regions are actually selling their properties there and moving to places such as Mexico or outside of the U.S. in terms of spending that winter season. They are also making changes to reservations and vacations that they had planned on vacationing to Disneyland or Disney World or the beaches down in Miami. And now they're saying, no, we're not doing that. And if people think that that is not a big deal, it actually is, because of the fact that Canadians represent a vast majority of the international tourism that goes into the United States each year. At that point, you're looking at about 10.4 million visits to the United States and bringing in billions of dollars in revenue for the U.S. government, which is about $20 billion. And to correct that, I believe it was actually, I'm just looking for the number. I got that one wrong. It's 20.4 million annual visits to the U.S. Now, that supports, as I said, $20.5 billion in economic advantage and supports about 140,000 jobs in tourism and likewise the supporting industries in the U.S. And that has really going to be a concern for those people who are operating destination, whether it is Airbnbs, whether it is hotels, motels, attractions. Just all of it is going to be impacted. If we see just a reduction of 20% of tourists from Canada, that'll remove 4 million annual visits and approximately $4.2 billion in spending, with the cost at about 28,000 jobs. So instead, people are going to be looking to spend their time here in Canada, up in the Rockies, checking out the Canadian wildlife, such as this bear that's just wandering around. And it will have a long-term effect because Canadians are not going to just overnight forget all of these, what we see as insulting behavior by the administration of the U.S., and it's going to be a long road to fix it, if it's possible to fix it at all in the next 4 years before Trump leaves office. And again, if he leaves office at the end of that 4 years, Angus.
I do find this quite an interesting story, actually, and I chuckle because, of course, it's very personal for you, James, being north of the border, and we do sit on different sides of the discussion about Donald Trump, but I don't know, but it does make me question, why is he being so rude about Canada? I mean, we all love Canada. I mean, I know there's a lot of rivalry, obviously, in North America between the pair of you, but he has been, I would say, overtly rude. So what is it all about? And he usually doesn't do this without a good reason. What is that good reason? I don't know. We can only speculate. I suspect, and I do know, that the Republican Party in the US, generally speaking, just never really liked Trudeau. I think that's putting it politely. I have actually spoken to one or two congressmen in the US, Republicans, and when they talk about Trudeau, it isn't just through gritted teeth. It's through, I think, apoplectic sort of looks. And I wonder if a lot of it is just, it's more actually personally against Trudeau and what he did and represented. Maybe that's why, and unfortunately the collateral damage is Canada as a whole. Who knows? And it'd be interesting to see after the elections, presumably when the right wing get into Canada, if relations, I suspect, will probably dramatically improve post-election, but we'll see how things go. I would say, just as an interesting addendum to this, and this does actually reflect a situation we have here in the UK, after we left the European Union. There was this massive Buy British campaign. There was this, and the EU, the European Union, was so rude about the UK after Brexit, after we left. Right. I mean, really unnecessarily. And we are European, geographically speaking. We've always had a bit of a rivalry, let's say, against Germany and France for obvious historic reasons. We fought several wars over the past, but ultimately we're still pretty friendly, and we still like the Germans. The French, deep down, would never admit that publicly. But But they were so rude about the UK that it engendered this big movement of, okay, we'll buy British. We're not going to buy German cars or French wines or whatever. We'll buy Californian wines. We'll buy Japanese cars or whatever. And we're not going to go visit the European Union for our holidays. We're going to staycation, as we call it. We're going to holiday home. And actually, this is, firstly, it's great. Environmentally speaking, if you're an environmentalist, you should support this whole concept because it means we're not burning all that fuel, shipping goods and people backwards and forwards. But secondly, it's actually great for your local economy, your national economy. In Canada, actually, ironically, although it's going to damage the US's economy, it is going to potentially be for the benefit of the Canadian economy because if people are staycationing in Canada, it's keeping the dollars within the Canadian borders. If they're buying Canadian goods as opposed to US goods, they might be a little bit more expensive now, but as time goes on, the economies of scale will kick in and Canadian goods start becoming cheaper for Canadians. So ironically, it may actually be doing Canada a favour, as rude as it may appear, James. Who knows? But I suspect my favourite law of all, the law of unintended consequences, I think is going to kick in here. Who knows? And just by almost its very definition, we don't know what's going to happen as a result of this. But let's watch it closely, James. I think it could be very interesting.
It's going to be interesting. And, if he was just picking on the Prime Minister directly, that might be a different issue because, or a non-issue, because a lot of Canadians would agree with them on that. But with the constant talk of annexing Canada, forcing them into submission and stuff, Canadians are just tired of hearing it and starting to really get angered by it, as seeing it as a real lack of respect for Canada as a whole. So we'll watch and see how it plays out. And, I've never been a big fan of Donald Trump, but it'll be interesting to watch and see what his goal is in this whole debacle.
Indeed. Okay, well, let's move on to across the Atlantic to here in the UK. And there's an interesting story I picked up just yesterday. That it's a nice story, and I do like to share the odd nice story. This is the situation. We have a historic university city called Oxford here in the UK. It's a very, very old city. It has a university that is actually globally known. But it's also huge for tourism. It has a very large tourist influx every year of people who come to see the university, who come to see a lot of the history of the city, and people locally have taken advantage. The locals, one of the local Sikh community members has taken advantage of this situation to create what he calls a walking tour exploring Sikh stories of the city, or Sikhs as we call them here in the UK. The BBC actually produced a story. They picked up on this. And what they say is it's a free community event and it explores Sikh cultural heritage within the city of Oxford. Now, Sikh History in Oxford is a 4-hour walking tour focusing on Sikh and related Indian stories that links the colleges and historic sites around the city. And it's led by one Sikh, Rav Singh, and a guy called Stephen Barker. And Mr. Singh said the tour covers a variety of topics, including women's history, contemporary people, and prime ministers with Oxford connections. Now, he's a member himself of the community organisation A Little History of the Sikhs, which weaves modern-day Sikh history and heritage research into walking tours. And the tour revolves around stories that they have collected over recent years. And as he says, we go to various colleges and museums and we just stop by and tell short stories of individuals from Sikh history or from the Punjab and their connections to Oxford in the spaces that these little histories took place. And believe it or not, there are some absolutely fascinating stories within this tour. And one story he particularly picked up, he found in a book called The Flying Sikh, the story of Hardit Singh Malik. And I'll come back to his story in a moment. It's fascinating. And that served as a centre for more stories that have since been added. And actually, Hardit Singh Malik, this flying Sikh, as he's called, studied at Balliol College, one of the well-known colleges of Oxford University. Mr. Singh then said he covers women's history, modern history, contemporary people from the past, prime ministers, all linked to Oxford. And the tour also investigates why Indian nationals came to Britain in the latter half of the 19th century, why the Indian Institute opened on Cat Street in 1896, and the ongoing connections between Balliol and South Asia. And Mr. Singh said people's eyes light up when they come across elements from the stories, such as the weather vane atop atop the Indian Institute. Now, normally in the UK, the weather vanes have a cockerel or a pheasant or something. I think on my house, I've got a pheasant actually on my weather vane. But the one on top of the college here in India, in Oxford, happens to be an elephant, of course, reflecting that Indian heritage. And the artworks created during the workshop will be exhibited in the museum's 50th anniversary exhibition opening in April this year. Now, again, it's a great reflection of how deeply embedded India is within the UK, of course, vice versa, because of the Raj. But India, and particularly the Punjab, has had such an impact here in the UK on even our local heritage. And of course, in our local culture and our local demographics and our local achievements. But one guy that I referred to earlier, Sardar Hardit Singh Malik, I had to look him up and said, who is this guy who obviously is a key part of this tour of Oxford? Well, he was born in 1894. He was an Indian civil servant and a diplomat, and he was actually the first Indian High Commissioner to Canada and then Indian Ambassador to France. He was also the first Indian to fly as a pilot with the Royal Flying Corps in the First World War. And again, it's an extraordinary story, really. He trained at the #1 armament school from April 1917. He was appointed a flying officer in 1917, and it took him a lot of goes, essentially, to get into the RAF. Of course, they were sort of, we're not sure. But he persevered, he actually achieved it, and he became a flying officer within the RAF. The early days, the most lethal, dangerous, frightened days of the RAF, when they were flying above the trenches in these things made out of balsa wood and almost paper. So, I mean, the bravery is extraordinary. Now, he was an observant Sikh. He wore a turban instead of a helmet. That's interesting. And later wore a specially designed flying helmet that fitted over his turban. And again, we've talked about this a lot, James, in the past, about firefighters or even soldiers. How on earth do they resolve wearing the dastar, the turban, with necessary helmets or respirators, etc.? Now, as a result of his unusual helmet, he was nicknamed the Flying Hobgoblin. A great name. He saw action for the first time in October. He shot down a German aircraft and was credited with his first victory. So he was a successful pilot. He flew combat missions over France and Italy in late 1917. He secured several kills. Now, in October of that year, he shot down another German aircraft, but he was wounded in the right leg during a dogfight. He and the rest of his flight was subsequently ambushed by German aircraft. While attempting to return to base, he was wounded, he was unconscious, and he crashed behind Allied lines, his aircraft receiving over 450 hits. He was hospitalised through November, but he did recover. He then went on to have a successful career as a diplomat, an extraordinary career as a diplomat, and he also played first-class cricket between 1914 and 1930. And this is just one of several extraordinarily high-achieving Sikhs that have been here in the UK. And again, that's just one of many stories. And I just wanted to pick that one out. He was awarded the Order of the British Empire. He was awarded a citizen of the Indian Empire. So again, just yet another high-achieving Sikh here in the UK. So if you happen to be in Oxford or anywhere near Oxford, anybody in our audience, do go along, go enjoy one of those tours. But what it does highlight, and what I like about this story, there are so many of these stories within here in the UK, and I'm sure globally as well, but here in the UK we have so many of these fascinating stories of these extraordinary high-achieving Sikhs who really rarely hit the headlines. Their stories rarely sort of get told, but it's wonderful to see these stories actually being recognised, James.
Absolutely. And, we've talked about, tourism and all of that, and really highlighting different unique areas. And this is another one, a way to really showcase the history, the culture, and the impact, the significance that the Sikhs have had, going back more than, a lot of people think, oh, it's been a couple of decades. But no, they've been here for over 100 years. In Australia for 200 years. I mean, yeah, the definitely no lack of history, and that includes at Oxford. I mean, they are really highlighting what the impact has been and really giving future students something to be proud of and a reason to select their school when there are so many to choose from. So yeah, I think it's a wonderful idea. I think that, they could take it not just to students that are visiting the campus, but also invite people from outside to actually come and take part in the tour on a much larger scale. So again, I think that it is an amazingly creative way to highlight and bring pride to the community.
And absolutely, I think you're right in pointing out the fact that how historic the diaspora is. It does go back 100 plus years. And it really is a testament to the philosophy of the genes of the Punjab and the philosophy of Sikhi. Because when they embed themselves, when Sikhs embed themselves into whichever communities they ever end up in, they are so entrepreneurial, they are so aspirational, and they do achieve extraordinary things. So I think this story really reflects a lot of that. So well done to Sardar Hardit Singh Malik, one of many high achievers in the community. Right, my next story, just a quick one. We've talked, and I don't know why I'm laughing. I think it's out of sheer just sort of incredulity. Is that the word? It's just another story of yet another Amritdhari Sikh who has fallen foul of this sort of ridiculous discrimination at an airport. This was the story of Birmingham Airport here in the UK. Birmingham Airport serves the Midlands of the UK, and the Midlands does have a large Sikh community. And I'm saying that deliberately because, of course, Birmingham Airport, therefore, must be fully aware of Sikhs passing through its doors on a regular basis as they travel to and fro. So it cannot have come as a surprise at Birmingham Airport that when an Amritdhari Sikh happens to pass through their security, it's most likely they will be carrying a Kirpan. Well, it does happen, does appear that this has happened yet again. And then it happened to, unfortunately for Birmingham Airport, it happened to an influencer. It's one of these people on the internet, for those dinosaurs like me, who, what on earth is an influencer? It's these people who have a large following on the internet, and therefore, by definition, they have this large influence over their audience. And it's an influencer called Ranjit Kaur. She's also known as @Sikh Colouring. And she was travelling through and she released a video regarding this right to wear the Kirpan whilst flying. And she released a video. I'll just quickly play the video for you so you can see what she posted up on social media, and of course has since gone viral.
Hi guys, so yesterday we were at Birmingham Airport with our Kirpan, but this time we had an issue. Normally we can fly through Heathrow, Birmingham and not have an issue at all. But this time they said that needs to come off and put it through the X-ray and that's it. And we were like, no, we've come through. This is actually compliant to your rules that you have created in the UK, that Kirpans are okay at certain sites. And so the manager came, supervisors came, everybody came. I think it was up to third level that we were like, no, we want to speak to someone superior. We need to speak to someone that is going to be able to help us because we're not doing anything wrong. Coming through wearing our Kirpan and compliant to your rules and your regulations, why is this still an issue? So eventually, so-and-so top manager came and said it's totally fine. We were there for over half an hour fighting our little corner, saying Sikhs can wear Kirbans in the UK, in the airport. You have to have the knowledge, have to stand there patiently, calmly, and be able to explain to them, this is okay. So just letting you know, when you go through Birmingham Airport and they tell you to take it off and you know your rights, stand by your rights. Goodbye.
Yes, interesting, and I think that all speaks for itself. And it, to be honest, it may have just been a bad day on security, and just had some new lad, his first day at work or something, and he didn't realise. As clearly as it got escalated, the manager came down and said, "No, don't be ridiculous. It's all right. That's okay." Well, it's the same old story again, James. We've had this before. I've got a question actually for our audience, and this did actually occur to me, and I'm genuinely curious about this. The objection there was she was asked to put the Kirpan through the X-ray. So, yes, of course, there is a discrimination to remove the Kirpan, but I'm saying, is it really that offensive to take the Kirpan off, put it on the conveyor belt to go through X-ray, and then put it back on again? again, I'm asking that question out of genuine curiosity. Is it literally, is it offensive to remove it from your person? Or is it, because to me it seems, I would say, almost a reasonable request to, okay, just put it on the conveyor belt, we'll X-ray it, you put it back on as you walk through the, the thing. Clearly it is. I don't know enough about the details of the Sikh sensitivities on this. So I'm asking my audience, is it really offensive, or is it just the general offence saying, we want to X-ray your Kirpan, and that's just taken at face value, why should you? But I'll leave that up to our audience, James, because that comes down to the fine details of where it becomes discrimination and where it doesn't. So, but here we are again, James. All I'm saying is that.
Absolutely. And I had the exact same thought as you, Angus. So I'm glad that you brought that up with the viewers to respond to that. Because, again, I don't know enough about it myself. And I think that this is a learning opportunity for us, but also for the rest of our non-Sikh audience, that it's a learning opportunity for us to understand it. And maybe there's people that work at airports that are watching our show. Who knows? Maybe this will give them a further understanding, not just at the Heathrow Airport or UK airports, but airports worldwide. I really look forward to your comments about that from the audience.
Yeah, because of course one of the stories we covered a while ago was the taxi driver who was actually arrested at the airport because they claimed he was carrying an offensive weapon. That is a very different story to this, where the person's just been asked to just put it on the conveyor belt to go through X-ray, which again is to me, I don't know. I'm playing devil's advocate here, but is it really offensive? Maybe it is, but that's where it's up to our audience to educate us, James, on our learning journey about Sikhi. Right, let us move on.
My understanding is that the removal of it in public or whatever. So, I'm curious to see what the response is. That's my understanding. But again, I don't know for sure any of that. But I also wanted to give her some props because she came across very courteous and respectful in what she said online. And if she had that same tone but firm with the airport, I think that's what really helped her, is just that no nonsense, but at the same time non-confrontational attitude to just say, look, no, this is what's allowed, this isn't what's allowed. Get me somebody so we can resolve it. And I think that if she came across like she did in this video, I could understand why they had the patience to work with her on it.
Indeed, and I also have an element of these influencers do tend to make drama out of not very much, and I wonder if there's an element of that. Again, I'll leave that up to our audience to put us right on that one, James.
That's right, and I wasn't there to see how she behaved, so I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt.
Absolutely. Right, let's move on to our comments section. And we had a couple of other comments on the podcast with Bhajan Singh Binder. Hardal Singh says, Bhajan was absolutely right. Sant Maharaj Singh Ji was tortured and died in Singapore, Outram Park it was. And, well, you see, this word torture, was he tortured? I mean, I don't think he was tortured in the traditional sense, and I've got to sort of almost reluctantly defend the British on this one. The British didn't go in for torture. That wasn't part of the British Empire. They were ruthless, but there was a line, and on the whole, generally speaking, they didn't cross it. However, what is your definition of torture? Putting him in a cell in solitary confinement without daylight, a small cell. I suppose you could argue that is torture. So. Yeah, but ultimately, did the British Empire do the right thing on that? Again, it's through the lens of time. It's very easy to judge based on modern sensibilities. At the time, it was the right thing to do for the British Empire. I'm not defending it. I'm just saying it as it is, James. Hard to say, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you need to look at Canadian war history. That'll teach you a lot about torture. We're not always the nicest people in the world.
Absolutely, James. And so the British Empire was the largest empire on the planet at one stage. But as I said yesterday, you don't get there by being nice. That's the unfortunate.
Absolutely. And they were ruthless in the battlefield, but they treated their prisoners of war or others outside of that realm, they treated with more respect because they were in captivity and they didn't need to torture them. And that was, really a last-ditch effort of the British, from my knowledge, to use torture in any way.
Now, Danny raises an interesting angle on this. He said, Bhai Maharaj Singh was born in Ludhiana. He didn't like the British, as we know. But in 1857, shortly afterwards, during the Indian Mutiny Rebellion, the Sepoys rebelled, 16,000 Sikh troops backed Britain against Indian states revolting. Sikhs were on different sides. I don't know the genuine facts about this, other than that I do know, and I think your point is basically, look, the Sikhs have fought on both sides here, so what's going on? Yes, they did, and actually the Sikhs generally are a militant race, and I say that in a positive way. They are military prowess is embedded in Sikh genes. It's just part of who they are and their history and their culture and their heritage, and they're very proud of that, as they well should be. And they do fight for justice, they fight for right, and they fight against injustice wherever they see it. And it has found themselves, they fought on behalf of India, effectively, against the British to fight for independence of India, because they saw that as a just fight. But in turn, they have fought for the British on many occasions since, and indeed before then. In other words, it's not black and white, Danny. I think the point here is it's not black and white. They fought wherever they felt they were fighting against injustice. I don't think it shows any signs of hypocrisy. I think all it does is it just shows they're just a very, very proud military race. I think it's nothing more than that, James.
Certainly, and we could even go back to the story earlier when we were talking about the annexing of Canada. And if you look at it, realistically, there would be some Canadians that joined the U.S. to help them win an annexation or a war to annex Canada into the U.S. There are people that would support Trump and the U.S. on that side. So again, it is not just about Sikhs and religion, but it's about national pride and what you firmly believe in and what you're willing to fight for. So I think that that's a differentiation that we need to consider as well, Angus.
Yeah, and history shows that wars are fought not by communities. It's usually individuals make up their own mind which side they want to be on, and quite often communities can be divided on that. So
that's right. Let's
move on, James. Free Spirits talks about the Indian military and police forces. We talked about corruption and everything, but what Free Spirit says, look at this photo that refers, I think, to one of the photos that must have been in the show. It shows fresh dug up dirt and white-looking cloth that has no dirt or spots on it. Next time, these forces will make sure that the wrap has spots as if it was buried and planted by these clouds. I think basically the point here is, James, is that we do know, and certainly I think with Deep Sidhu, what happened with Deep Sidhu with the alleged car crash, the Indian law enforcement are not unknown to, let's just say, plant evidence or create evidence to achieve the result that they are looking for, James.
Exactly. And, that's why they control the media. That's, he who controls the media controls the message, Angus.
Absolutely right. So thank you, Free Spirit, for pointing that, I would say, probably well-known fact out. Sukhwinder Singh. Right, Amrit Pal Singh, Khalsa, Jindabad, sovereignty, freedom, Punjab, a load of important words there all thrown together. But the point here is that Danny came back, and actually this is interesting because Danny has contributed an awful lot over recent days and over recent weeks, actually. And I didn't realise he is actually an Indian Hindu, so thank you for letting us know. That does explain actually a lot. I bow down to the result of Punjab's 20 million Sikhs referendum result, with zero Canadian, USA, UK, Australian, Punjabi interference. Let the public decide. Now, this is the key point of this long comment. And basically, I think what Danny is saying is, look, what you will do is you will respect the result of a referendum only if it is fair and it is not influenced by the outsiders, the diaspora, effectively. And then you talk about Kashmir, etc. And said, that's my job as an Indian Hindu to be as fair as I can. Well, thank you, Danny, and we respect that. And I'm sure everybody amongst the whole Sikh community would respect your right as a Hindu to represent your religion, represent your own views. And of course, we totally respect that. That's why we're happy to have your comments on the programme, because they are intelligent, they are respectful. They might disagree with much of the narrative, but we're more than happy to discuss that. Because actually, quite often, you're very right. And what I would say, but your point here about the referendum, the problem here, and I think, yes, you're absolutely right in theory, but in practice, Let the public decide. The problem is, firstly, India is not letting the public decide. It is refusing so far to have a referendum in the Punjab for the reasons that we state, is that we think actually the referendum will show that there is a widespread support for Khalistan within the Punjab. But secondly, you say without interference from the diaspora. The problem is that there is a massive support for Khalistan in the diaspora, because these people have been driven out of the Punjab through fear of their lives. They have been intimidated out, etc., etc. And this is the fundamental point about this. It is very difficult to have a fair referendum in the Punjab, is because many Punjabis who would support Khalistan have been driven out by fear. That is not democracy. We are arguing for fair democracy, and unfortunately, because of the Modi regime and what they've done, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to have a fair referendum in Punjab, James.
And that's just it. And even with the announcement that there may be some votes held in north or south regions of India, it's also a matter of how many people are actually going to be able to go out and make that vote, to have their voice heard at that distance, but also out of fear that they're being watched and that they may be targeted after a referendum. So there has to be some type of security assurances in order to have the democratic vote in India that assures that the India government is not going to retaliate against those who have taken part in the referendum vote. Because let's face it, it is all about the democratic process and the right to cast a vote. It's not about telling people to vote yes or to vote no. It's about telling people they have the right and the freedom to make their opinion heard. And that's, again, thank you for putting your comment up there. And we, as much as we support the Sikh community, we also support all other communities that are living peacefully and respecting laws, human rights, and each other. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day, Angus.
Indeed, and Danny signs off to say, my religion is brought into the comments and I will stand by my faith as you will yours. And absolutely you should, Danny. And I wish Punjab Sikhs every ounce of Chadi Kala to do as they will, and outsiders go back to Punjab. It's your land. And I think that's an important point. Go back to Punjab. And I wonder how many Sikhs, if Khalistan, if there is a referendum, I have no doubt that many Punjabis will return to vote in that if they feel safe to do so. And that's the key words there. Amrit Sarovar. This can only happen in the true democracy where a school is being named after Bhai Jaswant Singh Kalra. Now, this is the story, of course, James, that we covered, where there is that first public school in California being named after this heroic Sikh figure, Jaswant Singh Kalra, who was extrajudicially murdered by the Indian state back in the 1990s after he highlighted the dreadful events and gathered evidence of what had been going on in the Punjab in the 80s and 90s. So, of course, his school was named after him. And what Amrit Sarovar says is, alternatively, in India, he said, in America, this is what happens in a democracy. You can name schools after these heroic figures, etc. But in India, this doesn't happen. And in fact, the opposite is happening in India. And this is part of this almost Hindu colonialism, where they're naming schools. They're actually changing the names of schools across India, and particularly the Punjab, into Hindu figures, saying India cannot tolerate if in India a school is named after a Shaheed who died for India. That's a shame. So you don't get schools in India named after Sikh Shaheeds, but you're certainly after a Hindu. And which I think, again, is part of this colonial sort of subtle influence, where the naming public schools, public institutions after Hindu heroes, etc., but driving out the indigenous Sikh culture. It's very insidious. Right. And then, of course, you then refer to this date where Gurpratap Singh Pannoon said India will break up the balkanisation of India by 2047. I assumed because it was the anniversary of partition. What you say, Amrit, is that India will be the biggest economy of the world by 2047. And that's why it's picked 2047, James.
And that makes perfect sense as to why they would look at it that way and the year. But let's also keep in mind that, the world is a changing place and it is getting smaller. And I think that by different countries such as the US or Canada and such actually recognizing heroes of different cultures and different countries, it's showing that international respect. And I think that that's a big part of it, with especially when you consider the size of the diasporas in Canada, in the US, in the UK and such. It really is just opening up the community to giving a sense of ownership and pride in all different religious groups and all different backgrounds and such, Angus.
Absolutely right. And the final comment of the show comes from Jaswinder Singh Rai. He says, and this refers to Amritpal Singh, who remains in prison and, of course, therefore cannot take up his seat in the Lok Sabha. And, of course, they're now trying to move that he is removed from his elected post. And as you rightly say, Jaswinder, this is a sheer violation of human rights. Not only of a duly elected member of the Lok Sabha by a tyrannical, Brahmanical and terrorist state, absolutely well described, as well as a violation of human rights of constituents who is representing. Of course, he is there to represent the constituents. And their voice is therefore being denied. So it's their human rights that essentially is being denied. But then you ask the question, why is Amnesty International keeping mum? In other words, staying silent on the matter. Human rights organisations aren't taking up the matter on world forums. I think, well, generally speaking, they are, not specifically about the Amritpal Singh story that I know of as yet, this latest news. That's probably because it's too early for them to sort of have spoken out about it. I think that there is a legal case that is being launched by Amritpal's legal team, so it's probably a little bit early yet. But I dare say if he loses that case, I think all these human rights organisations will be all over it, because they have been very vocal and very courageous actually to stand up to the Indian regime. They've talked about the BJP's particular and specific oppression of the minorities, certainly over the last 10, 11 years in India. They've been very vocal about that. They certainly have not been afraid about highlighting the fact of what the BJP have been up to in India, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And let's not forget also, not to take away from the seriousness of this, but the international human rights agencies are again limited in what resources they have. And they've been very closely watching everything from Israel and Palestine to the Ukraine war. I mean, there is just so much going on in the geopolitical world and the human rights world right now that the international aid organizations and human rights monitoring agencies are stretched to the very, very minimum. So I think that may also play a role in that. And let's take a look at the fact that he also is speaking out and wants to create drug reduction and elimination programs to get rid of the substance abuse problem that's in the region. And interestingly enough, we didn't cover it on the AI earlier when we did that story, but the AI actually recognized that India could be using the increase in substance abuse and drug problems within the region to distract and take away from the Khalistan referendum movement. They could be and likely are using different things such as that and crime to press an urgency for people to be dealing with that as opposed to focusing on the referendum and the Khalistan movement, which I thought was a very interesting turn or concept that was brought up by the AI going through all of that information. I thought it was very interesting, but it also shows why they are continuing to keep him in custody, and that is because he will help to clean up some of the issues that are facing his community, and therefore they can focus on other issues of importance. And maybe that is, just trying to keep you looking at what the left hand is doing while the right is doing something else, but keeping your focus here. So again, Angus, it's just an interesting point I thought I'd bring up there.
Indeed, and it's really all the more reason why we need to continue the work that we do, James, to highlight the truth and bring the truth to the world, to highlight what actually is going on inside India, because certainly those in India really don't get to see the truth through the Indian Gaudiya media. But unfortunately there we must leave it for another day. You have been watching Perspectives for another day. Please don't forget to keep those comments coming in. Loads have been coming in. Thank you for all of them. They're fascinating, some of those comments, really interesting to read. Loads of educational content, so please keep those coming. Do let us know your thoughts on the stories that we cover, particularly when we ask you for your input on some of the stories to educate James and myself on our learning journey about Sikhi and the community. But in the meantime, don't forget you can also message us directly at message@satlechtv.com on any news items you'd like to bring to our attention, something that you don't want to put in the public domain. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching Perspectives. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.